We're having two meetings tonight. If you are just arriving, we had a very short hearing before this, but this first of two meetings is our yearly organizational meeting. So what we do is we elect president, vice president, we set the schedule of all of our regular meetings for the whole year during this meeting. This meeting will be very short, and there's no public participation in this part. And then when we adjourn this meeting, then we will go into our regular or special meeting, I would say, to discuss the various options of what could be put on the May ballot, where there will be public participation and so forth, like a normal meeting. So with that, I want to call this organizational board meeting to order. Autumn, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gardner?
Here.
Mrs. McAvina? Mrs. Opaskar?
Here.
Mr. Sherbin?
Here.
Mr. Stobie?
Here.
Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, Autumn, just one point of order question. We have two separate, obviously, points on here, nomination for president and vice president, and there's an administer the oath. Are we going to do the oath one time after both are?
Correct.
Okay.
We can do the oath one time.
Perfect. So the first will be nomination for the office of president, and I will nominate Jim Stobie to be president.
Second.
Autumn, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Sherbin?
Yes.
Mrs. Opaskar?
Yes.
Mrs. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Stobie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
You can't vote for yourself. I guess you can.
Yeah.
Next will be, are there any nominations for the office of vice president?
Nominate Mike Sherbin.
Second.
Autumn, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Opaskar?
Yes.
Mrs. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Sherbin?
Yes.
Mr. Stobie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Do we administer the oath now, or, okay.
Yes. If you would both raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as president and vice president in and for the said Avon Lake City School District, Lorain County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is chosen and qualified? The answer is I do.
I do.
Thank you. And I will need both of your signatures on that oath later.
The next item on the agenda will be setting the dates and times and locations for our regular meetings. I believe currently we set all our meetings here in the Lake Center the third Tuesday of the month. Are there any conflicts with that?
July we take off.
Oh, in July there will be no meeting because we do not have a board meeting in July. But other than July, does the third Tuesday of the other months work for the regular meetings?
I believe so.
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess we have to set the date and time for our organizational meeting next year. Will the first,
January 6th.
yeah, the first Tuesday, January 6th of 2026 work for everyone for the organizational meeting for 26?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. Do we need a motion on that, or
I
is
think
it?
so. I think so.
So could someone move for
So
those
moved
dates?
to take.
Second.
Please
Mrs.
call the roll.
Gardner?
Yes.
Mrs. Opaskar?
Yes.
Mr. Sherbin?
Yes.
Mr. Stobie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And then Autumn, you have some consent items that are on this agenda.
I do. For your consideration would be very normal business. Our entire organizational meeting is full of normal business. So we have the approval of the tax budget, which was presented at the tax budget hearing, tax collections, advance of those tax collections, the authorization to pay bills, any security substitutions, authorizing a 412 certificate, the authorization to advance, return advances, and transfer funds, the authorization to bid, open, and tabulate bids, authorization to credit interest to various funds, and to designate a public records official. Typically, the board has designated that the treasurer be the public records official, to appoint an OSBA delegate and alternate. So we'll have to do that after I go through these.
Okay.
Appoint a legislative liaison for OSBA and the student achievement liaison for OSBA. Appointing a JVS representative. Appointing a member of the West End Redevelopment Commission. The authorization to approve charges that exceed board policy. Authorization to approve the signature of the treasurer. Meeting compensation. Being involved with the Ohio School Boards Association, so the membership for 2025. Appointing 2 members of the Finance Committee. The authorization to provide bank information to the Lorraine County Auditor. They now do direct deposit, so that's why that is necessary. Minute-taking procedure, the copy cost and billing, the waiver of fees, as well as the approval, or I'm sorry, and that would be all of the treasurer's consent items. So if we could look back and go back to the OSBA delegate and alternate, we would need to appoint both of those positions.
Didn't we do that last year? I just don't recall.
Yeah, it was Jen.
Jen.
And I think I was the alternate.
Okay.
So I nominate Jen again to be OSBA delegate.
She's not here to defend herself. I can be the alternate delegate.
So Mrs. McAvina will be the OSBA delegate, and Mr. Stobie will be the alternate.
Yes.
We would also need to appoint a legislative liaison for OSBA and then the student liaison.
These are 2 separate as well. So do we know who was last year?
Recall.
Do you know, Otto?
It may have been Jen as well.
Oh, all right, well, why, if it's not broken, why, so I nominate Jen again for the legislative one, or is it one person? Or
It can
2?
be one person.
Okay, Jen.
So we will appoint, the board has appointed Mrs. McAvina to be the OSBA Student Achievement Liaison and Legislative Liaison. We would need a JVS representative.
This was Gail, and if you would like to serve, actually, yes.
That would
okay.
be me.
Thank you. So the recommendation to appoint Mrs. Opaskar as the JVS representative.
And then Jim, were you?
I don't think the West End Redevelopment Commission still exists in existence in that format.
Yeah,
Well, we have this conversation every year, and we're not sure if the city, when we've researched it, this still exists, even though we don't believe it exists necessarily in the same way with the city.
Okay, you
So
can put
we
me-
have every year
can put
appointed
me in there.
someone just in case.
yeah, you put Jim. We'll give Jen a break on this one.
So Mr. Stobie has been appointed the member of the West End Development Commission.
Can we make it one of his responsibilities to come back and let us know if it still exists?
We looked it up online, and it still exists in name only.
Okay.
That's why we keep appointing someone to it.
All right.
And then we have, what, 2 members to the Finance Committee?
Correct.
It was myself and Jim, and I'm happy to continue.
Perfect.
So the board will appoint Mrs. Gardner and Mrs. McAvina for that role.
No, Jim Stobie.
Oh, Jim,
Jim.
I apologize.
I thought you said Jen as well. I was
Jen.
like, oh.
I'm sorry.
So it would be Mrs. Gardner, and then Mr. Stobie would be our finance representatives. Thank you.
So do I have a motion to approve the treasurer's consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Stobie?
Yes.
Mrs. Opaskar?
Yes.
Mrs. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Sherbin?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Let's see. Next item on the agenda are the superintendent's consent items.
Thank you. So again, standard organizational business. Eligibility of released students, this has to do with OHSAA, board legal counsel, the legal firms that we will be working with or will continue to work with this year. Payment of expenditures, grant applications, and this is all just giving pre-authorization that we can go in and write any of these grants prior to board approval. Activities, budgets, home instruction tutors. We do run into occasion where we need to provide services to kids who are on home instruction. Designate in absence of the superintendent. So in my absence, Dr. Debe would be the person designated to take over my role. Surplus property disposal, attendance at professional and in-service meetings, non-salary remuneration, project applications, purchasing agent for the district that I sign off on all purchases that are made by the district, hire personnel and accept resignations. Sometimes that doesn't line up with board meetings, so it allows us to be able to make those recommendations ahead of time and allow people to start work. Appointment of staff to positions for 2025, and that is all I have for you.
Any questions for Ms. Magyar?
It seems like those really have not changed at all from a year ago that I recall.
May I have a motion to approve the superintendent's consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Autumn, please call the roll.
Mrs. Gardner?
Yes.
Mrs. Opaskar?
Yes.
Mr. Sherbin?
Yes.
Mr. Stobie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the final item on this agenda is the superintendent's discussion action item.
Yeah, so this is just allows us to make changes as come needed if laws change or whatever to any policies and or administrative guidelines throughout the school year, and that as long as it's brought to your attention that you can review those either through board action because it's a policy or because it's an administrative guideline that we make you aware that we've changed processes.
Is there, is this an approval? May I have a motion approving the discussion action item?
So moved.
Second.
Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Stobie?
Yes.
Mrs. Gardner?
Yes.
Mrs. Opaskar?
Yes.
Mr. Sherbin?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the final is, may I have a motion to adjourn this organizational meeting so we can move into the next meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Stobie?
Yes.
Mrs. Opaskar?
Yes.
Mrs. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Sherbin?
Yes.
Motion carries, and the meeting is adjourned at 6:13 PM.